what I'm getting at is you and I don't have to decide where appropriation is. Ultimately, consumers will. It's not up to me or you to discuss whether or not this is cultural appropriation. I am warning entrepreneurs that.
Today we've got Victor Guardiola, founder CEO of Bowie. Like, dude, this stuff is so amazing, man. How are you?
Thanks, man. I'm doing well. How are you?
Great. I'm super stoked. Tell me about Bowie. Like, let's kind of just jump in. Like, what is Bowie?
Bowie is one of the first better for you Hispanic beverages on the market. Specifically, we're lower sugar, lower calorie Agua Fresca. And Agua Fresca is a traditional Hispanic beverage, typically made with fruit juice, water, and sugar, although there are some varietals there with horchata and Jamaica. But yeah, the true mission behind the brand was being one of the first health innovations within the Hispanic beverage category.
What are other Hispanic beverages?
No, I like this question. Well, I moved here when I was 2. I'm the youngest of 3. So food and beverage has always been, I guess, my strongest link to my culture by far. And I think for a lot of Hispanics, especially in Texas, South Texas, where I'm from, the beverages we found nostalgic, which would be traditionally 2 beverages, Jarritos and cane sugar Coca-Cola, the one in those big glass bottles. And although those drinks are incredibly nostalgic to so many Latinos and immigrants here in the States.
Tell me, like, how did you get to here? Like, what was the driving factor where Victor's like, all right, I'm going to launch a company and this is what it's going to be?
I was always very interested in food and beverage and entrepreneurship. Those 2 things kind of separately at first. And whenever I moved to Austin and got into UT, I saw that they had a food and beverage entrepreneurship program. And I had been floating a ton of these ideas in my head around whether it was a better for you Hispanic beverage or a caffeinated mint, which is what I was actually trying to do at the time. But nonetheless, I started exploring the idea of what a better for you Hispanic beverage would look like. And it became really clear to me that there was not only a problem to solve from a health perspective, but also this disgusting business opportunity as well, with Mexican food and beverage being the second most common menu type. Agua Fresca has an incredibly high level of consumer knowledge as far as cultural beverages go. We saw that there was a great opportunity to create a better for you Agua Fresca. And this pineapple can behind me, that was actually our version 1. My mom used to make a pineapple Agua Fresca growing up. It had a lot more sugar than what Bowie has today. But we started tinkering with it. And at the time, Jordan, he was my co-founder. He was helping us get this off the ground. And we were quite literally going to Whole Foods on South Lamar and asking primary market research questions like, what do you find Hispanic? What do you find refreshing? Going up to people with Topo Chicos in their carts and really trying to tease out the sort of attributes we wanted to design around. So
how did you go from pineapple flavoring, figuring that out, to I'm going to launch this product and what's it going to cost?
So whenever we were doing that market research, that was around 2019, 2020, throughout this UT Austin entrepreneurship program. And at the end of the program, 2 things were happening. I was graduating from college with no job lined up, right? And we wanted to take Bowie to the next level. So our options were pretty limited. Both my co-founder, Jordan, and I, we were working for different CPG companies at the same time. He was working in a sales domain, and I was the right-hand man for a CPG founder here in town in a growth and marketing capacity. And specifically in the growth capacity, that's where I learned how to fundraise. And that was likely the most influential job I've ever had, bar none. Worked there for 9-10 months. I saw how my boss was able to fundraise. And I mean, from like a systematic perspective, here's how he organized his Google Sheet and CRM. Here's the sort of copywriting he would do on cold emails. And I had graduated with a degree in public relations writing, so professional writing and communication. And a few months into that job, I realized, damn, I think I can do this.
Yeah.
I think I could do this pretty well. And I think I could give it a solid try. So I worked for Clark Nowlin at Golden Ratio for 10, 11 months. And that was whenever we first got our lead investor. And that was Patrick Terry from P. Terry's Burger Stand here in Austin, Texas. The people from Central Texas will balk at that because it's a cool spot. It's like our In-N-Out. Okay. And that gentleman, his investment allowed us to pursue Bowie full time. Then the founder of Torchy's Tacos came in, and some other really notable investors. But it was quite literally entrepreneurship practicum in 2019. And then shortly after, we got these jobs and we were in farmers markets at the same time, trying to self-fund the development of the business, trying to fundraise in the background. After, I think, 4 or 5 months in the farmers market, this all kind of happened concurrently. COVID reared its ugly head and on-site consumption was no longer allowed. So we were like, shit, guess we gotta fundraise. So that's what we did. And that's whenever Patrick Terry finally heeded the call and threw in a small investment. But it was enough for 2 20, 21-year-olds who just wanted to cover their living expenses to quit their jobs and pursue it full time. And that's exactly what we did. I bawled my eyes out when we got his investment and I quit my job the next week.
If we go back to the farmer's market, what are you selling? Like, this isn't like, you're not selling this, right? Mm-hmm. Like, is it in a jar? Like how are people walking away with it?
So we had something called a jockey box, and a jockey box is like a cooler with some metal coils in between and a tap on the outside. So what you'll do, and what we did, is we would batch our Agua Fresca at night and we would put it in kegs and we would connect the kegs to the jockey box and we would serve our Agua Fresca on tap in a cup in the summers here in Austin. Mm. That was our MO. But from like a production perspective, I felt like I was in an elementary math problem every Saturday. Like, Victor has 100 pineapples. He needs to XYZ. But it was a shit ton of manual labor because we were using real produce. Right. Like, we processed the pineapples, the cantaloupes, and the watermelon. Those were our 3 flavors. So we had cantaloupe, watermelon, pineapple. Cantaloupe and watermelon are really hard to commercialize for a ton of different reasons. Mm-hmm. And we want to create an exceptional product. So until we're able to do that, we probably won't.
All right. So you go from filling cups at the farmer's market to moving into the small batch at a brewery. And that's so funny. I literally yesterday I had a conversation with a company here in Arizona called Arizona Lemonade Stand. And they're like, we're going to these breweries, man. And just to get them to clean the equipment, to run our stuff is such a hassle. And I'm like, I never even thought of that, right? Like, the issue of having to fill something, you're not going to go to the big guys. You got to go to the small guys. And who are the small guys? So if you're out there and you're looking to launch a beverage, I guess that's something you've got to consider, right? And then it's also, did you can at that first? When you were doing the brewery, or are you going into bottles? Like, how was that?
This is actually a funny question because we wanted to start with bottles, but we were starting like the tail end of COVID. So the glass industry was just shit on completely. Mm-hmm. And the flip ended up happening where now metal commodities were getting more expensive toward the end of COVID. But yeah, to your question, we were producing in cans in these smaller facilities. They were only optimized for cans, but really it just goes to show you, like, that brand you were talking about yesterday, the reality is Bawi and that brand you're talking about, we probably could have only stomached a few of those botched production runs financially. Sure. Like, it had to work at some point, right? So I think that's something people should keep in mind with these smaller producers, because the truth is, like, a ton of small CPG producers are a couple spoiled batches away from their business disappearing, their livelihood. It's crazy.
At what point do you go to the design? And at what stage are you like, all right, now we're ready to kind of grow up?
Man, I've been excited to tell you our design story. Well, really, we had worked with a designer prior to the working assembly. And I think what became really imperative to me after working with that first Austin-based agency and designer is these agencies, they need to have diversity whenever they're designing cultural products. In the agency we worked with here in town, not to disparage them or anything like that, but there was zero diversity whatsoever. My undergraduate ex-girlfriend was working there, and she was the only person of color in the entire organization. There were like 30 white girls and then one black girl, right? And I had heard about so many people's experiences at that agency. And whenever we were starting to be presented with the first iterations of design, it became very clear to me that their design inspiration was likely off of Cancun Spring Break 2017 Pinterest board. That was the level of cultural authenticity that they could tap on, because it's a ton of,
yeah, it's what they know.
It's a homogenous group, and I would expect nothing less. So,
dude, I can totally picture that. By the way, I can totally picture what that design would have ended up like.
Yeah, dude, it was comical to a certain extent, and somewhat offensive too. I was like,
sure,
that's what y'all think Mexico is? That's crazy. But I digress. I ended up interviewing over a dozen agencies coast to coast. And I was looking for agencies who had diversity, and that was super, super hard to find. It still blows my mind somewhat, but I saw the working assembly out of New York had an incredibly diverse team, specifically on the brand team and on the actual illustration side. So Anthony Fernandez was the brand lead at the working assembly at the time, and Diego Barragan, he was their illustrator, and they understood Mexican culture and typography incredibly well. And I think it was just evident off of the first meeting that they were the right crew to help us design this. And I had just got off of a direct consumer coffee company where I was working with their head of growth, and I was seeing how he analyzed quite literally like homepage. He was making these assumptions based on conversion in such an interesting way.
Yeah.
I wanted to optimize our front panel for conversion as well. I wanted to optimize it for trial, without being an e-com driven company. And that's exactly what we did. And that's why it's high contrast. And what we index for the most is I want the front panel of Bowie to be able to communicate to both Hispanic and non-Hispanic consumers. So for non-Hispanic consumers, for our white customer base, they can tell that this is a fruit juice forward beverage that's culturally differentiated. Do they need to know what Agua Fresca is? No, They don't need to know what Agua Fresca is. For our Latino consumers, they can see that this has a Loteria motif. It has Hispanic typography. There's probably a certain sense of nostalgia that comes with picking up our cans that has a bit more semblance. But nonetheless, it was really important for us to take a similar approach to Siete Foods, right? To speak to both sides of the market, because I think a lot of cultural founders, they end up hurting themselves and at times even the category by indexing too sharply on the culture they're trying to serve. Because the only way we really win and make an impact in large respect is by creating a mass market beverage that can disrupt the industry in a material way. And yes, it would be lovely to be purchased by a massive beverage conglomerate that has distribution in Mexico, Central and South America. But nonetheless, if this puts fear in their hearts and they innovate in this direction, I've done a good job. That's how I'm looking at it.
Let's kind of just unpack a little bit of that. One, design And culture is huge. I just did a trends episode where I had Anna Eisen from who does CPG packaging, and she's like, culture is going to be huge in 2025. But you said something in here that was like crazy important and it's easy to overlook, which was you can't just design for the market you're trying to serve. There's that like threshold of this is normal, and then like this is okay, this is a little too far into a culture. And you guys like balance this so well. So how do you balance that?
That is the art of the package design. That's what it felt like to us whenever we were getting started. Like for me, whenever I'm thinking of our package design, it almost comes from like a communication from like a first principles perspective. And those were the early conversations we had with the working assembly as well, is just like, I want to be able to present this to a group of my white friends, and I want them to know exactly what it is. And there's some very cheeky ways you could go about doing that as an entrepreneur. So in some of the earlier accounts you get into that have zero traditional marketing support or demo support, but have decent visibility within a competitive set, I think one of the greatest like litmus tests you can do is see if your can gets picked up without any additional marketing. I think that's such a tell for an entrepreneur. Like, is this driving trial by itself or not? If you can't get to the store first, there is a mountain of polling you could do on Instagram in a scrappy way, and you don't need a Qualtrics account to do this. I quite literally was posting screenshots. It said A or B, A or B, A or B, all the way through D. Yeah. And the sample size was significant enough for me to be like, okay, I think I do trust the responses here, because again, my dad's a statistician. So I've been talking about sample sizes and data science like my entire life. And some of these early tests and early experiments were so formative in blending with some badass like package design. So I think it's really important for these early iterations to be tested. And I'll share this with you separately, but we had 6 incredibly unique creatives to go down. The Bowie creative you see now, the Loteria one, it looks unrecognizable from what it is today. Wow. That's how much it was refined. So out of those 6 creatives, we chose one, and it looks completely different from that original creative. Like night and day difference. Wow. And that was inspired by doing this small scrappy testing. And that small scrappy testing is super important. And it can be as broad as, what do you like more, A or B? Yeah. Or it can be, quite specific too, which I got specific as well. Like slicing the pineapple, that's a creative decision, right? Yeah. So
versus just like a full
30 Helens agree.
Love her. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you don't have to drop people into like 20 question surveys. No one's going to answer your fucking 20 question surveys.
Like 1 or 2, A or B.
Yeah, 1 or 2, A or B. And that info should be formative enough to get you started. And the last thing I'll say on this is make sure your sample size is at least like 100, because we're trying to scale out to mass market, talking about potentially millions of consumers. So just get good data behind it, but nonetheless, don't let you're having me talk on my high horse this time, but I would say let data be a good indicator, but don't let it decide what you're ultimately doing. I think polls suggested a different creative approach on our front panel when we were getting started. And both my co-founder and I were like, fuck that. I think this is the right vehicle.
Right. You can just feel it.
Yeah.
No, amazing. No, love the packaging. And then like your case pack, insane, right? I mean, it's a bigger version of this, but it's horizontal. It's huge. You got a giant Bowie logo. The logo is killer. Like the arch, everything on here is so simple, but when it all comes together, man, it's super powerful. So love it. I can't imagine seeing this thing on shelf. Like, so if somebody wants to go get this on shelf, like where are you guys?
The easiest way to find a place near you is on drinkbowie.com on the store locator. Right now we're pretty centrally concentrated in California and Texas. Those are our primary geos, but we're available online. We're technically nationwide. If you look on the store locator, you might be able to find some place near you, but yeah, if not, we'll be out there soon.
Like you got funding from Torchy's Tacos. I think there's a Torchy's over here by me. Do they carry you? Was that part of the deal?
I was having a conversation about this morning. Hopefully they will quite soon. A lot of our investors, it's been interesting because they've been a scale above where we've been at for a while. I would say the Torchy's is a prime example. The past 12 months has been the only time where it makes sense for us to expand there. Also because it's a really important relationship, and we'd love to make our earliest investor proud. But soon enough, we're going to start tapping on some more of our cap table, because there's some really cool people involved there.
Is your goal to be acquired, or are you like, I'm growing this forever? This is my family's legacy.
I don't think this will be my family's legacy. However, I'm 26 years old. I love what I do. I'm comfortable. I'm in no rush to sell quickly. And if I'm looking at things the right way, I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for us to sell to wonderful organizations in the next number of years. And I just want to make sure there's good alignment individually whenever we begin speaking to those people. But I think we're going to start getting hit up about these sorts of things in the next 24 months or so. So I'm just batting it away until it seems reasonable.
As culture continues to grow, like the flavors and the colors and everything from around the world start coming here and start hitting shelves, there's that fine line of cultural appropriation, not just in flavors, but in design and pretty much across everything. What is that line?
I think this starts with wanting to have a conversation to begin with. I was toying around with some jokes about Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's Terramana tequila or Kendall Jenner's 818 tequila.
Right.
And although there are some pretty egregious examples of cultural appropriation within Hispanic beverage in particular, I think the really important piece here is for us to ask ourselves whether or not we're comfortable with it. And I'll go even a step further. I've had varying degrees of these conversations, from neutral, mild, excited, etc. And I think it's very easy for people to feel, I guess, uncomfortable by having this conversation to a certain degree. And I just want to contribute to having more sorts of these conversations over time, where we can clearly define, or where we can begin to have a conversation. I remember the point I was trying to make. But what I'm getting at is, you and I don't have to decide where appropriation is. Ultimately, consumers will. So we just saw this really recently with the Simu Liu in Dragon's Den. If you saw that milk tea video that went viral like 3 weeks ago, you should look at it after this. Yeah. And that company ended up getting publicly slammed because it was two white founders creating like a milk tea or like a boba tea concept. And regardless of where someone falls on this side of the aisle as a beverage entrepreneur, you have to recognize that ultimately your opinion doesn't matter. These consumers are going to voice their opinion once they find out about you at some point. So it's not up to me or you to discuss whether or not this is cultural appropriation. I am warning entrepreneurs that, given the state of cultural sensitivity, your customers are going to tell you if they find it messed up. No one else is going to have to tell you they find it messed up. If you become a successful CPG business that touches millions of consumers, your customers will tell you if they find what you're doing uncomfortable. And for most people within the CPG industry, we want to have millions of customers. That's where we want to go. So it's like, let's start having the conversation, and let's also understand that my mouthpiece doesn't matter, or whoever's speaking at BevNet Live last December, their opinion doesn't really matter, all things considered. It's the customers' opinions that matter, and they will voice them. Someone will get canceled in the next 12 months. And I hope I get to clip this and be like, what I'm saying, man, our opinions don't matter. The customers will speak up at some point.
Yeah, it's interesting because like today, it's so different. It's such a different environment for CPG than it was, even like when I was growing up, like 10, 15 years ago. If there was a Latino, Hispanic inspired brand that was hitting the shelf from one of these big players, it was like, oh, they see me, and you were appreciative, right? Where now it's like, well, wait, what are they actually doing? Who's behind this?
Who are the 6 white dudes who own all of this?
Yeah, that are now trying to grab my dollars by flashing my flag in front of my face, and that's it's such a big shift. And I think there's still people that still think that way, where it's like, oh no, it's like an homage to them, but culturally things have changed quite drastically.
And I think like a really interesting point to make here is ultimately this creates for a subpar experience for consumers when they don't have as many cultural innovations within these categories. And to, our point before we started recording, buyers are starting to see and investors are starting to see cultural differentiation as innovation within a category. So previously, everyone was looking at function. Does this zebra milk have ashwagandha infused to it, or 3 to 5 grams of fiber, right? But now they're starting to see, oh my God, here's the sparkling beverage category, and this Agua Fresca came up. What the fuck is an Agua Fresca? This is cultural differentiation at its finest. And as these socioeconomic differences as this delta starts to decline, essentially, we're going to see more and more cultural entrepreneurs and cultural products hit the shelf. And that's going to create best case scenario for customers all the way down the supply chain. I think that's the part that baffles me and excites me is in 20, 30 years, whenever we walk down the beverage aisle, we're going to have a significantly different experience. Whenever we walk in the grocery store, hopefully it'll be a bit different.
Amazing. And as we wrap up, just one last thing. So if I am launching a product specific to my culture, whatever culture it is, what's like the one key thing of getting well-designed packaging on shelf?
Yeah, I think the big piece of advice I'm giving is you need to ensure that you are not siloing yourself culturally. You need to make sure you're not just speaking to one small subsection of a customer cohort. If that's what you want to do, if you want to stay like a small mom and pop business, farmer's market, keeping the family, totally can. And you could stick to your niche. However, I think for most entrepreneurs who do want to create something mass market, my suggestion would be have your culture represented within your package design, certainly, but make sure it's accessible to a mass market. Basically, in layman's terms, you need to make sure you should be indexing for people who are unfamiliar with your culture, and they need to be able to understand what you're doing and selling. And I think that should also be a qualification step to even embarking on this cultural route, because there's so many wonderful foods and beverages across cultures that will eventually be commercialized and could be successful beverage concepts. But I think we need to be careful in thinking of the educational hurdles one might have whenever they are bringing cepache or a sugarcane drink or something along those lines to the market, because to a certain extent, some of those concepts will find it increasingly difficult to compete and scale the way they would like to. So that's the qualification step first. Like, see if what you're working on truly has mass market potential. And once it does, package it culturally, but keep in the total addressable market in mind.
Go out, buy Bowie. Dude, this stuff is amazing. Huge fan.
Thank you, man.
This will be in my fridge forever.